Tokens, especially in Mardu, are back in such a big way, but if you want to properly pummel your pod, you may need to know the rules about these tokens to make it to the finish line. So we previously asked what happened if you have the new Infantry Shield equipped to your Chatterfang, you have a Peregrin Took on the battlefield, and attack with the Chatterfang. How many tokens get made? What happens to those tokens, and why? Lots of you answered and thought this was purely a math puzzle, and good on you, but the more keen-eyed of you saw that there was something a little bit more to this, so let's dive in. Firstly, let's start with identifying what effects or abilities these really are. Infantry Shield gives Mobilize to the creature it's equipped to, and Mobilize says whenever. This indicates that the ability here is a triggered ability, meaning it goes on the stack and can be responded to by opponents or yourself even. Now looking at Chatterfang and Peregrin Took, they have notably different terms, specifically if and instead. Instead being the big one. This means that they are using replacement effects. Now this is an important distinction because replacement effects are not triggered. They don't use the stack. Instead, they modify the original trigger. Though the term replacement effect can feel confusing at times, replacement effects cover a bunch of different types of things happening and can look several different ways in Magic the Gathering. For example, with replacement abilities and tokens, many replacement effects simply add more tokens or multiply the quantity of tokens being made. However, replacement effects in other scenarios replace one event happening with an entirely different event, like with Words of Worship. So in this case, we attack with the Chatterfang, we get a single triggered ability, and two replacement effects that attempt to modify the resolution of that triggered ability. Now that we know this is a single triggered ability with two replacement effects, how do we apply the replacement effects? Well, the good news here is that if you control both replacement effects, you choose the order in which they're applied. So we do have a choice. Mobilize will make 3 warriors, and Chatterfang will see these and make 3 squirrels, and then Peregrin will make 1 food. Or Mobilize will make 3 warriors, Peregrin will make a food, and then Chatterfang will see all 4 of those being made and make 4 squirrels. Now, if this is hard to conceptualize, consider the original triggers having to sort of filter through the replacement effects to get to the end result. Now let's take a pause and take a second to address something that could be confusing for less franchise players or players that simply just don't read rules, because why would you? In some cases, it could be easy to accidentally think that these replacement effects create an infinite feedback loop. You make warriors with the Mobilize trigger, which makes a food, which makes squirrels, which then makes a food, which makes squirrels, which then makes a food. However, there is a rule in place that stops this avalanche. 614.5 says a replacement effect doesn't invoke itself repeatedly. It gets only one opportunity to affect an event or any modified events that may replace that event. So this doesn't go infinite with itself. You can only apply the effect of each replacement effect once. Okay, so now that we figured out to trigger, we got replacement effects, really all we have to do now is the math, right? Well, remember we said this isn't purely a math problem. In a perfect scenario, we get 3 warriors, a food, and 4 squirrels. But it is important to note that at the end step, you sacrifice all of the tokens made this way. Why? Outrage, boo hiss, I'm angry. But this is where things get particularly interesting. So for this, let's refer to Chatterfang's rulings on Gatherer. The additional squirrel tokens created won't have any abilities the other tokens were created with. Anything else specified in the effect creating the tokens, such as tapped, attacking, that token gains haste, or exile that token at the end of combat, applies to both the original tokens and the squirrels. So the ruling here says that the squirrel tokens won't have any of the abilities that the other tokens have. So entering tapped and attacking is not an ability. It's just a condition of the token as dictated by the effect creating the token. And sacrificing the tokens at the beginning of the end step is a delayed trigger created by the shield. So neither of these are abilities, and referring back to the ruling, anything else specified in the effect creating the token, such as tapped, attacking, etc., applies to both the original tokens and the squirrels. Now, Gatherer does mention that the additional squirrel tokens won't have any abilities that the other tokens were created with. Now, let's delineate between abilities and like these conditions or delayed triggers. It gets much simpler if we know specifically what to look for. All right, a great example of this is Basking Broodscale and Chatterfang. If Broodscale makes an Eldrazi spawn creature token with sacrifice this token, add colorless. And Chatterfang replaces that effect with an additional squirrel. The squirrel does not get the ability to sacrifice itself to make mana. Really what I look for is the quotation marks, right? Basically, are we giving the token an ability in quotes, right? Does the token get something that it itself can activate or do, right? So that is the big difference here. Anything else that isn't that is an effect or a delayed trigger, some condition that the additional tokens will take on. So, to answer the all-important question of what happens in this interaction, when we attack with Chatterfang, we get 3 warriors, a food, and 4 squirrels. All tokens are tapped and attacking except the food, which is tapped but not swinging on anyone. And at the end of turn, we sacrifice all of the tokens if for some reason we haven't done something with them prior to the end of turn, okay? How close were you to being right? And did we trip up on anything in these explanations? Keep us honest here, of course. And let us know in the comments below if there are any other weird, wacky, or just difficult to understand rules interactions that you're just not quite clicking with, because we'd love to cover them. And if we cover your suggestions, we'll shout you out here in the video, of course. That being said, thank you for coming through to another Magic the Gathering rules pop quiz. Go out there and have fun and make a lot of tokens. God knows you were going to anyway.